This is Americanitis, episode 36 for October 31st, Halloween edition. I'm your host, Daniel Sagner. This podcast contains harsh language and covers adult topics. You'll be challenged by views with which you do not agree. We may not be politically correct, but we are correct about politics. Okay, that headline is very clickbait. Let's make it clear that I'm not saying don't trust the hard facts that you're told about COVID. The men and women who are working tirelessly to learn more about this virus every day are, I have no reason to doubt, professionals. When science is done properly, it is the most wonderful tool we have for discovering what is. I understand the scientific process and I respect it, so what I mean is not that we should be unreasonably skeptical of scientific discoveries. What I am saying is that scientists should not be dictating policy. You hear this bromide thrown around a lot, and I gotta say, we need to trust the scientists has bothered the shit out of me for a while. At first, I thought it was just because it sounds pandering, right? Like we're little children who don't know what to believe, and we need our statist thugs to stroke our heads and tell us it's gonna be okay because some magical men in white lab coats will make the bad thing go away, but that's not it. It could be my natural inclination to be extremely skeptical about anything that works its way through the twisted mouths of a politician, but as usual, it goes deeper than that, so I gave it some thought. We hear the clamor for lockdowns coming from those that claim to follow the science. For sure, if we all just avoided other human contact for about a month, some diseases, including COVID, could just cease to exist. The scientists know this virus best, so we should do what they say if we want this over with, right? Absolutely fucking not. First of all, there is no such thing as just scientists. I don't know where this notion comes from. At least saying doctors can make some sense because they're all given some basic training in one thing, the human body. If you break your leg, you call for a doctor, any doctor. Anyone from a pediatrician to a neurosurgeon should be able to set the bone and stabilize you. If you need a DNA sample analyzed, however, you would not call for an astronomer. And if you need a binary star system distance, you don't ask for a geologist. So what they really mean is we need to trust the virologists. Second, scientists are not policymakers. If some virologist in Utah, or even every virologist in the entire world, claims that we all need to stay in our homes for 3 months, you can tell them to shove it. They have no ability to enforce policy, and nor should they. Their job is to observe nature and report facts. The policy comes from our politicians, and I have a feeling that they're using the phrase, we need to trust the scientists, not only as a cop-out in case things go wrong, but also as a wedge to take more power than they should have by right. The powers of the politician come from the consent of the governed. If you don't like the decision a politician makes, and you can get enough people together, you can vote them out of office. You don't have the power, however, to fire some random virologist. That is why no scientist has power over you. Third, and most importantly, we should not listen to scientists telling us to lock down or do literally anything else. Why? Because the question has not been asked, for what purpose? Ostensibly, the answer is to end the pandemic, or to bend the curve, remember that little ditty? Or to save every single life we can, but those answers assume that those things are values. Values presuppose a valuer, and only individuals can be valuers. Society has no collective values. Only the individuals that comprise a society can have values. Science exists for one purpose. It is the process which discovers what is. Science tells us that COVID has certain properties, but it doesn't tell us what we ought to do about it. This presents a kind of is-ought dichotomy if you're not careful in your ethics and politics. Science is important for us to gain information about the world around us, but what we do with the knowledge is up to us. Science can tell us that a body in motion tends to stay in motion. It can also tell us the damage capable of being sustained by a human body when it experiences a sudden change in velocity. By this logic, and if your goal was to save as many people as possible, as seems to be the case with COVID, and you were listening to the scientists, the speed limit on the highway would be 15 miles per hour. But that's not the goal of highways. The goal is to get where you're going while balancing safety and speed. Therefore, we accept a certain number of dead bodies so that our commutes drop from 3 hours to 30 minutes. That may sound morbid, but that's the calculus that determines speed limits. We need to go places, and we accept a certain amount of risk to do so. If we take today's context, knowing everything we know about COVID, including the about 95% survival rate for those over 65 years of age, we can easily imagine two different elderly men who would have totally different reactions to the same data when deciding whether to visit their grandkids. A healthy 60-year-old man may conclude that he has many years left to live. He wants to spend those years enjoying his family, so he decides to take precautions against contracting this virus. He decides not to visit his family until he receives a vaccine. An 85-year-old man in failing health knows that he only has a few months left to live. He knows that they will be painful, and decides that he wants to be surrounded by his family, even if it means he'll catch the virus. After all, if it takes him a few weeks early, he wants his last memories to be good ones. He arranges transportation to see his grandkids as soon as possible. Only the individual can decide what his values are and what level of risk is acceptable in their pursuit. This is the chief reason why it is immoral for the state to use science as a battering ram, forcing blanket edicts on the populace. It removes the individual's ability to consider values, which removes his ability to reason, which removes his ability to live. So no, don't trust the scientists when they tell you how to act. Trust in your own ability to use your mind and guide your own life. I mean, we haven't even touched on masks. I have absorbed as much of the data available as I can, and while I'm convinced that even homemade masks can have some impact on the transmission of the disease, I'm not certain that encouraging the use of masks is wise. I'm certain that mask mandates are immoral for the reasons stated above, and from the standpoint of being an absolutist on the principle of individual rights. More on that later. Let's pretend for a moment that the mask mandates are not an infringement of your liberties somehow. Why am I not convinced that this is a good idea? I have seen the studies that show reduced expulsion of droplets when the subject wears a mask. I've read through the methods and they appear sound. I've also seen the effects of the policies that mandate mask wearing. In many states and counties, you can watch as the number of infections rise directly after the mask mandate. Now, you could chalk this up to increased testing happening at the same time, but in all the states at differing times? Maybe it's something else. Maybe the masks provide a false sense of security. In general, when people think they are safe and they think that others are safe from them, they take more risks. Instead of staying home because they feel sick, they figure the mask will protect others and they can go out to the grocery. Instead of staying 6 feet away from someone while having a conversation, they think that since they have the mask, everyone's okay. While wearing the mask, they have to speak up, expelling more particles at higher velocity. Add to this the fact that most people don't wear the damn things correctly, and you have yourself a recipe for infection. So, it may be that the top-down edict that everyone must mask up with whatever they have lying around the house isn't all that effective. Not because masks don't help reduce the possibility of infection, but because the appearance of safety encourages more risky behavior. While I have alluded to studies that confirm the efficacy of masks, I would be remiss if I didn't offer the countervailing evidence. There are some pre-COVID studies, link in the show notes, that show that post-surgery infection rates were higher or no different when surgeons used masks compared to when they did not. It is very understandable for you to be surprised by this finding. I know I was. It's like we all just think it will work because it makes sense, but we have no concrete proof. Everyone just said, yeah, of course, and we carried on doing it. It seems to me that we're being forced to wear masks as a kind of magical totem. If we all just believed a little harder and masked up a little better, this would all go away, right? The panicking Karens that will berate you for not muzzling yourself while walking outside in the fresh air are not just politely concerned. They attack with religious fervor. You can swap out mask with cross and COVID with Satan, and suddenly you are transported to the Dark Ages. The busybodies are timeless. There is nothing rational about this behavior. Nor have we discussed the World Health Organization saying that they don't recommend lockdowns as a primary method of fighting this plague. In an interview with a British magazine, David Nabarro, special envoy on COVID-19 for the World Health Organization, said the following, quote, "Lockdowns just have one consequence that you must never ever belittle, and that is making the poor people an awful lot poorer. Look what's happened to smallholder farms all over the world. Look what's happening to poverty levels. It seems that we may well have a doubling of world poverty by next year. We may well have at least a doubling of child malnutrition." End quote. Well, imagine that. Remember the claims that everyone protesting for an end to the lockdown just wanted to get a fucking haircut, and they were willing to trade bodies for the economy, those who spit out the word economy like it has no meaning, like it's just so much ticker tape, like it has no relation to Tom, Dick, and Harry. The economy? Like Wall Street? You just want to kill people to make your little stock numbers go up, don't you? You just want to make money off the backs of dead grandmas. Or maybe it's because the everyman can see more clearly in this case. Every honest worker in America can tell the difference between the wages of a day's labor and a check from Uncle Sam. One keeps you alive, but the other is the reason for living. Productive work, wealth generation, production, and profit. These are the things that raise the poor from poverty and provide purpose to a man's life. It is through production, not through redistribution, that wealth is generated. For, in order for the politicians to rob Peter to pay Paul, Peter must have produced something for them to steal. So you'd think that this would be the end of the discussion. Clearly, the scientists have noticed something to which our politicians have been blind. By locking us down, they've created a far worse situation than if you had been allowed to make your own free decision about how much risk you were willing to take, how valuable your career is to your life, to decide what you think the proper course of action is. Liberty. What a notion. But no. Just as the WHO says that lockdowns should be a last resort, governors across this great nation have called for second lockdowns and more restrictions. This might lead one to suspect that maybe, just maybe, this whole trust the scientists thing is really just a cynical ploy to grab power. That the science is convenient when it agrees with them and ignored when it does not. But hey, that's just speculation. We're all about observable facts here. After all, we trust the science. Got a topic or feedback? The podcast is at Americanitis Tech. You can also follow me at Dan Sagner. My last name is spelled Sierra Alpha Golf November Echo Romeo. Please subscribe via Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts if podcasts are your thing. I'm also on YouTube, so remember to annihilate that subscribe button. Patronize us at patreon.com/techside. Show notes are at techside.net/Americanitis. Theme music by Eddie. I thank you all for listening. Later days.